This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's May 16th, 2025. On this day in 1960, a Nashville retailer responsible for one of the city's more unique institutions died. His name was Fred Harvey. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. These days, it seems that all the big stores, physically big that is, are also big corporations. They're national chains. But for a long time, each city or region had its own local department stores that dominated the shopping experience. In New York, Lord & Taylor was known for luxury, while Macy's splashed out on big advertisements like its Thanksgiving Day parade and in-house Santa. Chicago's Marshall Field had a chocolate counter with special treats that could only be bought there. Philadelphia's Wanamaker had a massive pipe organ in its downtown location with a regular schedule of performances to serenade shoppers. In Nashville, Cardona leaned into the idea of Southern sophistication by offering fashion and charm school classes. Its competitor, Kane Sloan, courted a trendier crowd in the 1960s by staging fashion happenings, fashion shows where the clothes were modeled by area high schoolers. Both were on Church Street, downtown. And so was Harvey's. Interestingly, the most iconic location for Harvey's, the one most Nashvillians will still likely think of as the Harvey's store, was actually home to both Cardona and Kane Sloan before Fred Harvey moved his business into the structure in 1957. But Harvey's actually got its start next door about 15 years prior to that, when he took over a different retailer that was struggling to stay open. With two well-established and thriving department stores already in the neighborhood, Harvey decided he needed to really splash out and grab shoppers' attention if he was going to get his share of the business. He was not afraid of making his store flamboyant and a little bit wild. When he moved into that first store in 1943, Harvey quickly painted its walls an eye-catching bright pink and purple. He installed escalators, crazy house mirrors, carousel horses, and even caged monkeys. And it worked. People went to Harvey's just to see Harvey's, but they walked out with bags of merchandise. As the store grew and expanded into that building where his competitors had once been, Harvey's continued to emphasize the whole experience of being in the store. Ads had the tagline, "It's fun to shop at Harvey's." And it really was. On the social media pages that share snapshots of what life used to be like in Nashville, you still regularly see comments from baby boomers remembering how much they enjoyed the monkeys. My own memories of Harvey's are kind of fuzzy, but I definitely remember as a very small child wanting to ride the escalator so I could get a better view of the elaborately painted merry-go-round horses mounted between the up and down moving staircases. Now, Harvey's could be aggressive in its marketing and customer service as well. In 1960, the store ran a 64-page advertising supplement in the Tennessean. 64 pages. This in an era where Kastner's holiday ads were more focused on letting shoppers know they would close a little early on Christmas Eve. Throughout the year, Harvey's was open longer hours than its direct competitors. And when customers called in orders from outside the city limits, the store covered the long-distance charges. And Harvey's also got a lot of attention for donating a huge holiday display to the city. For years, the giant nativity scene made of lit trees and large-scale illuminated statues was positioned alongside the Parthenon, stretching the full length of the building and then some. It was clearly visible to drivers on West End Avenue, and everyone knew it was a gift from Harvey's. But remember how I said I only have vague personal memories of the store? That's because it was gone by the mid-'80s, even as Kastner's and Kane Sloan were going strong. Those two stores had fully embraced the move to suburban shopping malls. They anchored pretty much every one of the big indoor facilities alongside national chains Sears and JCPenney. Hickory Hollow, Rivergate, Green Hills Mall, they expanded out into all of them. Harvey's did dip its toe into malls, but it didn't choose well. It went out with the smaller malls that went bust really early on, like 100 Oaks. The iconic downtown store closed in 1984, and it really was the end of an era. The building was demolished and replaced with a parking garage. But at least Harvey's was always able to just be Harvey's. Kane Sloan was bought out by Dillard's. Cardona changed hands a bunch of times, with its stores eventually becoming locations for Macy's. They lost their personalities and slowly morphed into just another national chain. But Harvey's lives on in Nashville memories as a singularly unique kind of store. And for some of us, that name will always pop in our heads whenever we see a carousel horse. In just a few minutes, Julie Height takes us to the Biscuits and Banjos Festival. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together. A themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. State law lets Tennessee's prison system keep secrets about its lethal injection process, like where it's buying the drugs. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us the Department of Correction is now arguing it can hide that information from the courts. It'll make the case to a judge this morning, about a week before the state's first execution in 5 years.
A lawsuit challenging the state's lethal injection process is underway, but there's a bump in the road. Lawyers for death row inmates argue the process is unconstitutional on several fronts. Some of the complaints are about how the protocol is written, and some of them are about the Tennessee Department of Corrections' dangerous history of mismanaging lethal injections. Failures like untested drugs led Governor Bill Lee to put a moratorium on capital punishment. The attorneys argue that to truly understand how the mismanagement violates their clients' rights, the court needs information, like where TDOC is buying the drugs and who's in charge of administering them. Then, this information can be sealed so the public can't see it. But the state says it's impossible to share that information without leaks, and that anti-death penalty activists will use any information they can to interfere with the execution, like pressuring the drug supplier not to sell. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
Tennessee's first execution in 5 years is scheduled for next Thursday. Attorneys in this lawsuit and anti-death penalty advocates have asked the governor to pause executions until the court can rule whether the protocol is constitutional. Efforts to shutter the U.S. Department of Education are in full swing, and there's growing concern about how cases of discrimination in schools will be handled. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports on why Tennessee's most vulnerable students may suffer.
The Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights protects students from discrimination due to race, disability, sex, or religion, but investigations have slowed in recent months.
There are current cases that are not going to get processed and cases in the future that won't be taken up.
That's Juliana Patash, Manager of Advocacy for EdTrust Tennessee.
Which will result in active harm for our students and particularly our most vulnerable students.
She says this will particularly impact low-income Black and brown students. Patash worries about how acts of discrimination will be interpreted. She notes that the Trump administration made schools promise to end DEI practices or lose funding. Metro Nashville Public Schools has removed many references of DEI.
It sparks fear and anxiety for school and district leaders who will likely, in many places, start to overcomply and cut things.
The Trump administration is weakening the Department of Education by cutting its workforce. This, Patash says, makes her job harder because there's less technical support and data available. Another vulnerable population is kids with disabilities, according to Lydia Burris, Education Rights Program Manager at the Nashville Defender's Office. She says students rely on the Office of Civil Rights when their schools fail to protect them.
Like, what happens to the families who have already fought at their local school, at their local district, and have not gotten the protection that their child is entitled to and needs to be safe? When we loosen the oversight or we weaken the accountability, we loosen those standards, who's going to enforce it?
Both Burris and Patash worry about having to rely exclusively on states to enforce civil rights complaints. They say results will vary from state to state and county to county.
We are risking moving backwards, losing progress that has been made over the past few decades.
Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
Nashville's beloved nonprofit art cinema, the Belcourt Theater, turns 100 years old this Sunday. The theater has a long and colorful history. Teddy Minton, public historian and archivist for the Belcourt, tells us that it was actually the stage of the Grand Ole Opry before the Ryman Auditorium.
It was there from 1935 to 1936, about a 7-month period, but it was really pivotal because during that time, the show figured out its format, which it still essentially uses today.
Some of the floorboards at the foot of the movie screen in the 1925 hall are the same ones that held the Opry 100 years ago. You can hear the full conversation about the theater. Just search for This Is Nashville wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. A year after Beyoncé drew the world's attention to the erasure of country music's black history, the movie Sinners is keeping the conversation going with its tale of white villains trying to steal black blues genius. What's gained less notice is the fact that the grassroots movement to reclaim the black roots of folk and country music is having its own moment. It just had its own festival, too, and senior music writer Julie Height was there.
There is a very tangible through line from Cowboy Carter to the soundtrack of Sinners. And her name is Rhiannon Giddens. The old-time banjo virtuoso contributed to both of those blockbuster projects, but they're not her typical domain.
I love pop music, I love movies, but trying to be a traditional musician in these things is very strange.
Meanwhile, Giddens was busy creating something of her own, a 3-day festival called Biscuits and Banjos in Durham, North Carolina.
Really, Biscuits and Banjos is like my community, basically.
A community made up of black scholars of literature, foodways, and above all, roots music, most of whom are also performers. As Giddens sees it, she just happens to be the figure in that scene with a platform large enough for Beyoncé and Hollywood to come calling and to share.
I'm aware that this is a movement and it's not just me. The whole idea was that this aspect of what we're doing in our culture, I don't feel like is celebrated enough.
Certainly not within a music industry that's historically exploited and excluded them. That's why she knew it was important to create a festival outside the system.
Let's do something that is not about how much money it's going to make. It's not about what big brands we can bring in.
Giddens was more focused on getting her peers to Biscuits and Banjos.
There's so many people doing this work and we're all exhausted. Part of me wanting this to happen was like I needed a festival where we felt like we were not the only ones, that we were not the raisin in the oatmeal, and we were not carrying the load of trying to tell this story on our own. You know, for one weekend, we could see the fruits of all of our labor.
They've been cultivating those fruits for a while. 20 years ago, Giddens attended a conference called the Black Banjo Gathering, where she met a couple of other curious young musicians, Dom Flemons and Justin Robinson. They formed a black string band called Carolina Chocolate Drops.
Pulling corn and cotton too, and when the day is over, ride the mule and cut the fool and love again all over.
Flemons noticed right away that people responded to their deftly entertaining performances and decided that he should document everything.
Because I knew that eventually, if Carolina Chocolate Drops could bridge the gap between ancient string band music and modern string band music, kids that are not white could see that there's a choice. Because before, the conversation was, especially when it came to African American people, was I don't feel comfortable because I see no African American people playing the music.
Kaya Cater was feeling very self-conscious about learning old-time banjo as a Grenadian Canadian preteen until her first Chocolate Drop show.
And that was the first time I'd ever seen another black person playing the banjo, ever. You know, I was a musical kid. I'd been to tons of folk festivals, tons of bluegrass festivals. I mean, I'd seen a lot of live music.
And here were musicians not too much older than Cater connecting her to a lineage she knew nothing about.
It felt like I was catching up in a way to history. The drops weren't starting from zero. They were starting from this very embodied understanding that the banjo is a Black instrument. It's a Black Caribbean instrument. It's a Black American instrument. As a kid, that's what I remember holding on to, was like, oh my God, I have to know more about this right away.
The Drops eventually disbanded. Cater went on to make her name as a banjo-playing singer-songwriter, but was often one of the few artists of color booked at primarily white events. She finally felt like part of a movement when she entered spaces created by and for Black roots performers, like a small festival that another banjo player, Brandy Waller-Pace, saw a need for 5 years ago in Fort Worth, Texas.
Having something that doesn't rely upon external validation makes a huge difference. There's a certain freedom in it, and now that we're here, we can breathe a little bit, be centered on ourselves, not centered in having to defend ourselves.
Guards were down at Biscuits and Banjos as Waller-Pace set in with Cater's band New Dangerfield, the Chocolate Drops reunited, and a host of other artists teamed up on stage and in panel discussions.
And so I draw strength for both of these women and everybody who's here.
Giddens couldn't have been happier.
Like, to have artist after artist come up to me and be like, yo, I feel full. I feel cared for. I'm walking away from this lighter. That's everything to me.
For Nashville Public Radio, I'm Julie Height.
This roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up next week.